In this tutorial, I will be showing you how to do a provisional cast on, which allows for you to have live stitches on your cast on edge, and therefore you can pick up and knit in the other direction, allowing for an invisible seam. So in order to create your provisional cast on, you'll need a crochet hook and some scrap yarn. You're going to start out with a slip knot, and you put that around your crochet hook, and then you will take your working yarn and create a crochet chain by wrapping or looping your crochet hook underneath that working yarn, catching the yarn and pulling it through your slip knot. And then you're going to do the same thing, but rather than pulling it through the slip knot, now you're going to pull it through the chain that's on there. You'll make a couple of chains, and now you'll pick up your needle, put the working yarn underneath your needle, and continue to make crochet chains while catching your needle in between. So there's one, and now you'll be able to cast on the amount of stitches that the pattern calls for. So return your working yarn behind your needle, crochet hook goes over the needle, catches the yarn and pulls it through. Return the working yarn behind the needle, crochet hook comes above the needle, catches the yarn and pulls it through. Return the working yarn, catch the working yarn on top of your needle, pull it through your loop. Return your working yarn behind your needle, we're going to do this until we have 10 stitches. Now, if it is too awkward for you to hold the knitting needle in between your yarn and your crochet hook, you can also just create a crochet chain and then pick up your stitches and knit into them. Now that I have 10 stitches on my needle, I'm going to chain a few extra stitches. Now I'm going to cut my working yarn and pull that through. So now we have 10 stitches on our needle, and we can take our working yarn and just knit these as if we had done any other cast on. As you can see, I have finished the swatch and am now ready to remove the scrap yarn on the cast on edge. We're going to remove the scrap yarn from the tail side of the work. So look for the tail of your working yarn, and that is where you're going to remove your scrap yarn. And the reason we're moving it from this end is because it will remove much more smoothly going in this direction. So we're just going to very carefully remove the extra chains that we created at the end of our cast on until we expose our first stitch. So you can see there that it's right there, and then we're going to pull our scrap yarn gently through that stitch. And there we go. And then now we're going to take our needle and stick that into that stitch. And now you can see as we pull, just tug gently on this yarn, on our scrap yarn, it will just let our live stitches loose, and so we can put them onto the needle one at a time. Now, I do one at a time to be safe, but it actually is, you're not going to unravel too much. You might drop a stitch, but you're not really going to unravel too much because your work is going in the other direction. gently pull your stitches loose, place them on the needle. And I'm using this ridiculously large needle for demonstration purposes, which is making them a little bit harder to go on the needle. All right, now we have this one last stitch. And you'll notice that this stitch is actually below the rest of these stitches. So you're just going to pull that up, again gently just pull it up, and then you can pull your yarn through, and now it's on there, so you have 10 stitches. If you don't like that that comes from the below, from the row below, there's a couple things you could do. You could add an extra stitch and then knit 2 together a couple rows before you get to your final one. Or you could just let it drop depending on how many stitches you need and decide if you really want that last stitch or not. So now we have our 10 live stitches that we can use to either pick up and knit going in the other direction, or you might use it to graft a seam between 2 swatches of fabric that have live stitches. Finally, a little tip about the scrap yarn. It's a good idea to pick a different lighter color contrasting yarn than what you're working with, and cotton works really well to use as a scrap yarn because it's nice and smooth and doesn't stick to the other materials. So I hope that helped you to learn the provisional cast on. Now go forth and knit confidently.